Good morning, everyone. We're just going to start. This panel goes from 11 to noon, just to make sure you're in the right place. It is the impact of offsets on local communities. I'm your moderator, Rajinder Sahota. I work at the California Air Resources Board, oversee many of our climate programs, and this was a unique opportunity that presented itself to actually moderate a panel here, so I jumped on it because I get to talk to two amazing people and have them share out some of the great work that they're doing and some of the other non-carbon related benefits that they're seeing from carbon markets, carbon offsets in the space that they occupy. So I have with me Teresa Tattersfield from the World Resources Institute, and I have Javier Kinney, who's been a long-time advocate and a long-time partner with the state of California on helping to reduce GHG emissions in the state. And so welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us for the panel today. So offset projects. Offsets have had a roller coaster history, a roller coaster relationship with different groups over the last 20, 30 years. We know what happened in the CDM. We know California went a very different way and designed its own program that was litigated successfully, and we have a compliance program that is in place today. Its reach is outside of our borders, which is also unique for a California compliance program. But there's also a lot of work going on in the voluntary space, and there's a lot of work going on with corporations wanting to do good things for corporate sustainability goals, just environmental sustainability purposes, and just social stewards of the planet that we all have to share. And there's a lot of money that is being put out in terms of how do we make inroads on this climate change issue, and all hands need to be on deck, but we also need to make sure that everyone is realizing the benefits and the opportunities related to those offsets, or of those mitigation opportunities and investments, whether it's public or whether it is voluntary corporate private investment. And so what I really want to do is focus on some of the work that Teresa and Javier have been doing, but first give them a chance to speak to the experience and the perspective that they bring to this conversation. We know that there are very different programs out there, there are very different opportunities out there, and I'll have them share some of the space that they occupy before we do a small moderated panel Q&A with myself, and then we'll open it up to all of you to ask any questions you may have. So with that, Teresa, would you like to say a few words?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm very happy to share with you the experience we have had for the past years in a project. I work for WRI at the forestry team, and we have designed this a huge project in Mexico and many states in Mexico, the country, and which is called Comunitario. It's CO2 Comunitario, which is community and CO2. And the experience that I want to share with you is that when we first thought that we had to scale the carbon capture projects in Mexico, we had so many obstacles to deal with, and the main one was that, well, it wasn't an obstacle, but it was a challenge that we actually had to work on. Was the owners of these forestry and natural resources were the communities and the groups that were the poorest in Mexico, no? The poorest communities and the poorest groups in Mexico, the most marginalized. So, and also another challenge was that they, even though they have a very poor resources in one way, they have this way to get organized that it's very autonomous and it's very different from the cities or from the bigger towns, no? So we had to really adapt the methodology of the carbon capture project into this way of living of the owners to really make sure that these communities, that these people would really be integrated in every step of the long process that these projects have. So what we did also was to design this project in the sense of mapping the stakeholders and mapping the local organizations, on the technical organizations that were able to be the developers actually, and the guards of the project during the terms or the years that the project will last. So that is more or less what I've been here to tell you. It's that it's not only the projects, the carbon offsets like that, but the projects, but you really need that from scratch. Start integrating in the design of the project the way of living of the communities and of the landowners, and also make them be really part of the project, make them to be integrated into the project, and to really understand the commitments, to really understand the purpose of these projects, and if you have the time, the resources, and the capacity building tools, to improve the way of they govern themselves, no? They make the governance. So that is more or less the things that I want to share with you today about this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajinder and Teresa, and again, thank Cara for having us as well and sharing our story. My name is Javier Kinney. I'm the Yurok Carbon Project Manager within the Natural Resources Division of the Yurok Tribe. The Natural Resources Division makes up our forestry, fisheries, fire department, watershed restoration, wildlife, and environmental program. And so the Yurok Tribe has really taken on a portfolio approach to our natural resources management, and the carbon projects are part of that synergy. We have been able to exponentially grow the ability and the finance opportunity to look at how carbon sequestration can provide not only revenues, but also pivot to the nation building and governance aspects, working with Rajinder, with the state of California, as well as our private and industry partners and allies across the globe. We have 3 carbon projects within the Cap and Trade program. We also had, again, allies assist us to get to that in regards to trying to finance the purchase or reacquisition of 1.5 million acres of our ancestral territory. So if you're familiar with the tribes in California, we are the largest tribe with about 6,700 tribal citizens. We've purchased approximately about 50,000 acres in the last 5 years. So we're really on that trajectory to not only provide the technical capabilities in-house, share that story with other indigenous peoples, and again, like to acknowledge our Native Alaskan brothers and sisters also attending the conference as well, that exponential growth is only going to help those nation-building efforts and initiatives, not only within the governmental aspects, but we are now part of the industry. So within the last year, we've been able to organize and create other corporations and entities that not only benefit our natural resources management, but also provide the revenue and economic stability for our region, which not only benefits our local communities, but other non-tribal individuals and communities as well within that space. But we'll look forward to getting into more detail, and that's sort of just what we're doing currently.
Great. Thank you both for that short introduction. But before we move into my moderated panel, I do want Javier to share some of the exciting things that were happening this week in the nation, because if we weren't here, we would have been there. So Javier, please share what the exciting thing was that happened this week.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. And so with the consistent and objective opportunities for the land back initiatives happening across the U.S. and the world, we really try to promote the ability for the connection of Yurok people to our lands, to our waters, to our salmon. But we've been fortunate enough with some of the revenues from our carbon sequestration projects to release 2 condors, which hasn't happened in the last 100 years. And so in addition to that, I'm just getting chills saying it, but again, we're committed in having our team share our story in areas such as this, but the cultural leadership and that integral, critical component of connecting the Yurok people to our forests and having that connection be heard, not only here within the state and the 5th largest economy of the world, but it's really that mental and spiritual well-being that we're able to carry out that natural resources management. So we also own a mill. We also have also just announced the creation of Condor Aviation, which we are now the provider of LiDAR services. So we are purchasing both the airplanes as well as the next generation of LiDAR technology. So with that meld of traditional ecological knowledge and the advancement of technological natural resources management tools, we're connecting both our traditional ways of life with the condors, which we utilize within our traditional ceremonies and prayers to help not only balance the world for us, but for all of you as well, so you're included in those prayers, but to look at the creation of platforms that are going to help, that are driven by us, monetized hopefully, but also be able to help other indigenous peoples around the world. So just last week I returned from Manaus, Brazil with a delegation of the governor's task force with Richard Corey and again his work, but again under the leadership of Rajinder and again now Jason Gray at UCLA Law. We like to share those stories of our journey. We're not trying to tell people or persuade them what to do. We share our technical capabilities, our experiences, our challenges, our successes, and hopefully moving that needle forward. So that's the carbon sequestration projects on the Yurok ancestral lands are not just, again, a market tool. We believe in market-based approaches. We're going to continue that diversification in approaches and tactics to change not only governmental behavior, but corporate behavior, as well as infuse tribal indigenous business within those business models throughout. So that's what was happening this week and last week.
So next time this happens, we're going. Yes. No matter what conference is going on.
Yes.
And so as Javier is speaking, I'm thinking about how can I make a cap and trade logo with condors in it now for the state of California. But that's exciting, and congratulations. It's a huge milestone and a huge, huge contribution back to the environment to bring them back. Yeah, that's amazing. You should be applauded. Okay, so we don't have any beautiful condors to share here or have you pet today, and we wouldn't want you to do that anyway. But Teresa, I would really like it if you could share what is the role of government when you're working with communities. WRI is not really government, it's not private sector. So in the work that you do, how do you bridge government versus communities?
Sorry. Well, actually, right now in Mexico, there's no much support from the federal government in these themes, unfortunately. Exactly, WRI is not private sector, is not government. We are an NGO. And our role, actually, and what we're doing in this Comunitario project is that when we planned the project, we started with 2 components. The first component was to be able to do all the work at the rural communities, but also to start pushing the market in order to have the demand that would match with the offer that we were pushing out. And what we have been doing is trying, that's the word, at least dealing with the federal government in order to help them, for example, to promote the regulatory market that would start next year. For example, to review the caps of the companies that were set 2 years ago. For example, with Mexico CO2 and with CAR, last year we were hired by World Bank, but through a proposal from the federal government in order to write the standard for the national standard for carbon capture. I mean, we feel like we are waiting for the opportunities that the government will open for us to jump and help them to establish the structures to carry on the market. With the voluntary market that it's carrying on right now, we are not doing anything with the government, but we have been working with the federal one. But with the states of Mexico, for example, the state of Jalisco, the state of Yucatan, there are a lot more opportunity there to work with, because even though the states don't have much money, or sometimes they respond to a political plans instead of doing an environmental path, for example, even though that, they are open to have a advisory, or for us to bring money from the development banks or the international agencies in order to place projects with them. So we can also be in that role. We can be the bridge between these organizations in order to place. But I insist that the work is mostly with that subnational governments instead of the federal ones.
So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question.
Sí.
So you have private investors, the voluntary markets, and you're helping to support and maybe spur action at the federal level. How much of your work in this space is really about trying to develop standards or protocols, protocols for early engagement with communities where these projects can happen? Because traditionally, sorry, I've been talking for 3 days. Traditionally, you see, thanks Javier, I know where you're going.
Bring water, please.
And so traditionally what you see is a protocol, which is a methodology with math, equations, diagrams of the boundaries, but you don't see a lot in those in terms of community engagement. So is the space now evolving in some of the voluntary protocols to actually build some of that language in? Or is that still something that's held to the side and needs to be better integrated into a protocol?
Well, actually, we have been the project that we have, Comunitario. It's developed under the Mexican protocol that CAR has, and also we review the CCB from Berra, and we took from some of the safeguards that they had in benefit sharing, for example, and we integrate those. In this this national protocol that the Mexican government asked us to do, what we did was to put the social and the environmental safeguards that we usually carry on in our projects, and it really worked, but is not approved already.
See.
So the Mexican government allows to have projects with the CAR and the BCS, and I think the Plan Vivo standard, and it's from the developers to carry on and to integrate these social safeguards to really assure that the project will be complete with success, and also will have the permanency that it's required from these kind of projects.
Okay.
So it's the developer that does that.
Got it. That's good to hear that the developers are paying attention as well to some of these emerging things to try and build in that buy-in at the community level.
Yes.
Yeah. So Javier, you're in a slightly different position because I'm a regulator and you represent a sovereign government. And we found a way to make it work to where I can still hold a protocol that has enforceability, because that's in statute, and still respect the rights of a sovereign nation. Do you want to speak to how we got to that point in that relationship, and anything else about the conversations that happened in the community in terms of, are we really going to be part of this, or do we not be part of this?
Yes. No, again, and thank you, Rajinder, as well. And let me start from today and walk back from there. So, again, the Yurok tribe has really been on the forefront of, again, nation-building initiatives, not only with the state of California, the federal government, but also the international legal bodies, is we appreciate consultation, but we assert decision-making authorities as well. And for now, Rajinder, Madam Chair, other state agencies, Secretary Crowfoot was with our tribal council yesterday. The state of California is really setting the trend of recognizing and respecting tribal law, tribal sovereignty, both in shared areas, but also of challenging areas. So Rajinder can call myself, can call our tribal leadership and saying, here's what the issue is. But Yuroks really like to come with solutions, and a lot of times that's either negotiated or mediated or created in a synergy where there's mutually agreement. In the carbon cap and trade program, my understanding was tribes weren't always included. So as Yuroks do, we'll kick down the door, say hello, but, start drafting and trying to find the financing mechanisms to do that. There's a storied past between Yuroks and the state of California, but again, as I mentioned before now, Rajinder, as well as her staff and leadership team, we're trying to create that within the state agency systems as well. But we also take that to the federal government because of that unique political status and governmental relationship we have. So we know the state of California is talking to the federal government as well and coordinating these types of nature-based solutions, technological advancement. So we want at that table. We are also engaged in the removal of 4 dams, 2 in California, 2 in Oregon. So although our ancestral territory is larger than our reservation lands, so our Constitution provides we want to reacquire all of those ancestral territories. We assert 200 miles off of the coast of California, where 7% of the coastline, again, of the 5th largest economy in the world, go up the river 45 miles, but again, assert the ability to co-manage up into Oregon, another 400 miles. So that process has taken 20 years. The negotiations to purchase some of our lands from the timber companies in the area has taken another 15 to 20 years. So we're in it for the end game. And so working with not only governments, but again, now being industry ourselves, broadband is also an infrastructure issue. And again, Madam Chair was part of the CPUC at that time as well. And we're seeing that flow of not only cooperation and partnership, but it goes a lot longer. We don't hesitate to litigate as well. So we like to hold that, but in that litigation cost, we find that the ability to communicate effectively and efficiently with all of our partners makes more sense. I'll be presenting as a respondent and presenter for the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples next week as well. And what I'm sharing with you, the story will get on the record and be provided to the United Nations General Assembly as well as part of that report. So we respond, again, to not only problems, but we come to the table with solutions. The finance commitment as well, internationally, of $100 billion. That's why we engage in the COP26 as well in Scotland. We're at COP23 in Germany. We'll be at COP27 in Egypt to engage not only and educate what tribal sovereignty is, how that nation building fits in within our not only subnational economies, but how we're being the thought leaders and actual technical experts when it comes to our ancestral lands. So that's non-negotiable, but the ability of professionals and also being a University of California Davis Aggie, I think Rajinder is in a prime training aspect. I'm also an Aggie as well, so yes. And so, that sort of understanding of creating in these curriculums. If you're getting an MBA, we're working with academic partnerships with Yale, Harvard, UCLA, as well as Stanford. And so within these curriculums of these future professionals coming out, they're going to know the Yurok tribe, they're going to know our lands, they're going to know our issues and the problems and challenges of how we've been disrupted. So we're disrupting back in a positive and change-making way. And again, before I forget, there's an open invitation for everybody in the session. If you haven't been to the Yurok Ancestral Territories, we'll make sure and follow up. Carr knows how to get a hold of us. Come up and visit for yourself and see the work that we're doing on the ground. If there's abilities to partner and create that synergy of that ability to create a better tomorrow, count us in.
Thank you. And Javier is not making things up when he says they will break down the door and then come in and want to have tea with you, because that's essentially what happened when we started out with the cap and trade program in California. The tribal aspect of the offset projects wasn't recognized, just as the federal government isn't recognized because of our state limited authority to enforce. And once we started talking to folks from the Yurok tribe and some of the other nations in the state, we quickly learned that we could negotiate and come to mutual conclusion on language that respected the sovereign rights of the community and the nation to be able to self-govern all of the things that they deserve to be able to do and are entitled to do versus our limited need to have enforceability. And so we threaded that needle together, and we have not been able to do something similar with the federal government on federal lands, but we've been successful very much with many tribal nations, starting with the Yurok in California. So that is a success story, and I think that model has served us well in other efforts that we've had with some of our state programs and the nations in the state. So thank you. So, and also, you had great attorneys when you started out. So Teresa, I want to talk to you about the private sector. You're setting standards, the private sector is thinking about this. There's a lot of potential money that could be released into projects and mitigation after the COP26 discussion about corresponding adjustments, all of those pieces. And so what do we need to do, or what are you thinking of doing to make sure that all of this private investment, the people that are investing, the hedge funds, all of those big corporations, they understand the importance of that community engagement, and what kind of benefits are we highlighting for them in terms of beyond carbon, like benefits beyond carbon? So what's that story?
Well, we have been working in related in those themes because what happened in Mexico, it was like 4 years ago, nobody was paying attention of the carbon markets. We were actually begging the private sector to look at us, to understand what these projects were up to highlight the co-benefits, social and environmental for the communities, et cetera. And the private sector had this vision, this philanthropy vision, no? Instead of being part of a market, they were like, okay, so I'll buy this offset, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to help you. So that vision has changed already in the past 3 years, actually. It's not that much, and not that long. So right now, what is happening is that since it's going to be open, the regulatory market in next year, there has been a lot of speculation from the private sector and a lot of speculation from the developers, and everybody wants to develop these kind of projects, but without taking care of these social and environmental safeguards and all this engagement of the community that we just talked to. So what we right now, WRI, and with many other organizations that were really worried about this situation, what we're doing is just not only making a strategy in order to do a capacity building for the communities, in order to integrate these efforts into the price, into the deals, but also like do this whole thing, this information, delivering information, capacity building with the private sector, that if they want to integrate offsets into their mitigation strategies, they really need to pay attention of rules of commandments of whatever you want to say, no? That first of all, you really need to see these offsets as part of the strategy, but you really need to work in reducing emissions strategy internal. And that it's kind of easy in Mexico because the rules of the regulatory market establish that only the 10% of the mitigation would be in offsets. But anyways, they really need to do something to reduce, and if they want to purchase offsets as a complement. They really need to focus that even though this is a market and there's a speculation, there's brokers, it can be seen as a business. It is not. The objective is conservation. The objective is mitigation. So the strategy of these mitigation activities have to be in order to preserve the ecosystem, to really pay what they are actually getting on, which is not only a ton of carbon, but a ton of carbon that it's making the difference in a community that maybe will provide clinics, it will provide highways, it will provide a better way of living, a better livelihood, no? And in the other hand, is not only a ton, it's a ton that conservates biodiversity. It's a ton that really preservates the water basin, the soil, the landscape. And all these co-benefits have to be reflected in the price, but only reflected as a win-win strategy in the purchase, in the strategy of the company. So the company could say, I'm not only mitigating, but I'm also conservating. I'm not only just paying or just accomplish the law, but I'm also doing a lot more by buying these high-quality offsets that I'm making sure that integrates all these safeguards and all these co-benefits, and I'm not just buying a certificate from I don't know what project. So it's a very important to really educate this private sector in order to really scan the projects, really make a due diligence, really make sure that what they're doing it's the right way to do this kind of mitigation.
So we have a program, but I'm going to ask you this anyway. What is the role of government in helping to make sure that you're not just investing in that carbon offset, but that bigger picture and the price setting for that bigger picture? Is that a standard that naturally evolves through the private sector because they're getting educated, they buy in onto this, they know that this is the right thing to do? Or is that a standard or a concept that government needs to pick up and push out?
Well, what the government has done is, or the government rules are saying is that. And that is why the forestry offsets and the agriculture offsets are so a la mode, no? So people, it's really searching these kind of offsets. It's because the law says that that you can offset this 10% at the regulatory market can only be offsetting by the sectors that are not regulated. And the only sectors that are not regulated are landfills and agriculture and forestry. So with that, the government is setting the rules that the offsetting has to be only in these sectors. So what we are doing, because the government is not supporting any other but that, is what we're doing is just approaching and making a huge strategy of capacity building with this private sector just to really point at the good projects in this. But unfortunately, the government is not part of the the conversation in that place. Exactly.
Got it. So, Javier, within the nation, when you decide to pick up another project, because you mentioned you have 3 projects, is there a discussion that happens, and if it's private, you don't have to share it, is there a discussion that happens about just the carbon, or is it a discussion about the carbon and the other aspects that come along with the revenue from the carbon when you decide to do a new project?
No, yes, we have an internal metrics of looking at how does a carbon sequestration project fit within that larger natural resources portfolio. And so our needs far outweigh the financing we receive, not only from carbon sequestration, but the shortfall, which again, there's federal responsibility. And again, that's why we've been able to, we're about 90% grant funded, about 10% income generation. Our chairman, James, wants to switch that from 90% income generation to 10% grant funding. So when you have 2 varying counties, Humboldt County and Del Norte County, diverse in the spectrum, and we're disrupting that type of change. One, you have the historical wealth holders within those areas and just the power dynamics. So we've taken that on directly, and we're going to continue pushing, again, that needle. So when you're talking about purchasing lands and lands that now you're reacquiring from other private industry, other private landowners that don't necessarily want tribes to have power, or the scientific fact that once lands are within indigenous stewardship, that we do sometimes a better job. So we've been advising, for example, cultural burning. So now you're seeing fire resiliency, fire prevention. The Yurok tribe has always utilized fire to reduce the mega fires that you're seeing today. We were ignored in many ways, but now the state of California and the federal government are instituting those. So what the Yurok tribe is also doing is not only promoting for funding in carbon sequestration of how the risk can be reduced, but the policy value in protecting local communities. So we do, again, consider ourselves as environmental justice proponents. We are that direct action tribe. But we are also seeing as being, again, a mill owner, a farm owner, owner of a microbrewery, as well as 2 construction companies, both the 8A, non-8A, and now a tech company. We're seeing that, okay, how's this portfolio approach going to work for everybody? So we like, again, hearing the net value of our brothers and sisters in Alaska of billions of dollars. We like that. We support that. And we support other indigenous peoples getting to that financial ability. But we have to have the internal capabilities, not only in infrastructure, but again, people. So we're trying to, again, create that ability. So when we have a carbon sequestration project and you're committing to 100 years, a 25-year crediting period, what Yuroks are going to carry out that work. So we have to plan that. We'll continue, and it's always a challenge in regards to creating that, preventing a brain drain, because if you can make such and such amounts in other areas, we're wanting to bring those people home, those youth home, but we also want to value the traditional skill sets of canoe building, of basket making, of, again, paddling. So these traditional skill sets are valued just as much as a PhD. And so the Yurok tribe is really trying to invest in those types of initiatives as well. But again, we have a lot of non-Yurok professionals, which we encourage. We can't do this alone. We're about, again, 6,700 tribal citizens, but we make up less than almost 2% of the local area. So when you talk community, we look out for both Yurok and non-Yurok because there's an integration between those families. We don't separate and say, no, we're just doing this for Yuroks. We're doing it for the ancestral territories. We're doing it for the people that include those types of communities. So if it benefits the Yurok tribe, it's going to benefit the region. So that's been our approach in the metrics of how we're looking at not only, and now we are looking at the varying carbon markets, not only in compliance, but again, the voluntary, and looking at what that space looks for. We are getting inquiries by corporations and companies. But even in our sales, we have a metrics of who the buyers are, because we recognize the paradigm shift of going from an extractive economic industry to a regenerative economic industry. We support the regenerative because that's what we do culturally as a paradigm and the alignment. And so, again, we recognize the emitters and the need for the buyers, but we also realize how are we going to change that space in a positive way to, again, combat climate change. I mean, it was 102 yesterday. I'm not sure if any of you have felt 102 in April. I like the sun myself. I'd rather be hot than cold. But again, we have sort of this spectrum of things that are happening. We were knocked, our power was out for 15 days, because of a snowstorm. And it wasn't the snowstorm. It was actually the ice after the snow. And I'm not sure if you guys believe in Bigfoot, but it was like Bigfoot was knocking down trees outside. So those are the types of considerations we take, not only for carbon sequestration, but our fisheries and our fire and our watersheds, and how can that benefit exponentially those areas. Did that answer your question? I wanted to make sure.
It absolutely answered my question, but I have a follow-up. Did you say you also have a microbrewery?
So, yes.
Okay.
So, again, this portfolio approach, Mad River Brewery is located in Blue Lake, California. We had one of our Yurok tribal citizens engaged in the industry. There was an opportunity to look at, because we started the Yurok Agricultural Corporation. So we have a redwood niche mill, which provides sort of fencing panels for Lowe's and Home Depot. The Mad River Brewery, which again creates the hops. And again, during the pandemic, they're able to pivot and provide some of those sanitation products as well. And then a 40-acre organic farm. And so that portfolio right there has just changed us from, again, just being an observer and a customer. We are now engaged. So today, I'm not sure, I think Anaheim and Los Angeles are all Giants fans. So we signed a partnership with the San Francisco Giants, and today they're opening up for opening day, providing 3 Yurok products. A Steelhead IPA, which is an award-winning IPA, a state IPA, which some of those proceeds, again, the transfer of land. We took over a visitor center in Stone Lagoon. So now within a state park, the state parks recognize the Yurok tribe can do it better and help generate that revenue within our ancestral lands. And then, if you like, the undammed seltzer is a huckleberry seltzer, which again, some of those proceeds go to our dam removal efforts and fish and river restoration. So it's those types of Yurok business mindsets that, hopefully others will see, this makes sense. And changing that charitable contribution from a corporation get in their sort of gross and then contributing to a charity later, we're including those indigenous principles within their business models now. So that's what we do in our tribal business entities. Go Giants. So, that's sort of a different perspective of a tribe owning a microbrewery, but it's that systematic change that we're trying to bring forth and the economic strength and leverage to do that.
Thanks for that. We have about 15 minutes left, and so I want to open up the floor to questions from any of the audience members. Just raise your hand, and I'm happy to call on you. Question in the back?
Well, actually, I can talk about the experience in Mexico, and it has changed a lot, actually. And it's, as I was saying before, it's another way of involving, because what had happened in Mexico, at least at the forestry sector, for a long time, it was that nobody wanted to invest in that sector. Why? Because the revenues would last, if you invested in this year, you would have to wait maybe 30 years to see your money again, because with any climate disaster or natural disaster, you could lose everything in one day, because there was a very tricky way to see the investment in either forestry or agriculture or these kind of sectors. So private sector with their business head was avoiding all the time getting involved in this. But with the carbon markets, it's totally different, because we think that the carbon markets set a table where communities, and I'm taking out the government because of all the reasons that I have talked to, but in the Mexican case, but at least with carbon markets, we could sit in the table, private sector and communities, and NGOs, of course, as a link, as a bridge, no? To start talking the same language, because both of them are recognizing that they really, for example, the communities, that the owners would have to conservate, and not only for them, but for the private sector to have the water that they would need, the biodiversity that they would need in order to start doing the products. So with carbon markets, they started talking the same language, you know? So they said, okay, so this is business for all of us, but we also suffer all the consequences if we are not conserving that. Us as families of the owners of the companies and families of the communities, no? And also the workers and everything. So they found this table to start negotiating, and they started talking the same language, and they started having this common objective where they could start. And so the community started learning about brokers, about revenues, about all this business language, that it was the first thing in a lot of time, no? So I think in a good way, taking care of making these high quality offsets, taking care that the market, it's the integrity market, that really it's working and integrating all the things that we have talked to about the safeguards and co-benefits and everything. It can be a very good path to open this joint venture between private sector and communities. I think that's a way of doing it. Javier?
Just briefly, because again, we don't want to talk out of turn as well, but what we do support, again, with the state of California, is that the Yurok tribe has been in many of the situations, economically, politically, legally. 200 years ago, someone was looking out for us. So, when we go to countries that, we encourage the governments to recognize those rights of indigenous peoples, the inherent rights. We also understand that the varying land development plans. We understand the various different interests. But one, don't criminalize indigenous leaders for speaking out and protecting their rights and resources. Number two, at every opportunity, provide the monies directly to those indigenous communities. And number three, and most importantly, the cultural integrity and lifeways need to continue. So the Yurok tribe recognizes those traditional laws and those traditional lifeways in a way that are inherent to indigenous peoples worldwide. So we like to do that here in California. And again, I know it can be sensitive, but being in Brazil, having to go everywhere with an armed guard, Colombia, Bolivia, our leaders are being prosecuted for things that they should not be, and they're just wanting clean water and clean air and the protection of their land rights. So we do encourage the private sector in those countries as well. Give the land back. Find a way to transfer that stewardship and that co-management in that respectful way. So, that's what we continue to share. That's what they've asked us to share for them as well. We don't speak for other indigenous communities, but we share our story and know that challenge and again, coming to the table with solutions.
Any other questions in the room? Yes. Sure. So we're seeing it. We're seeing when Washington adopted their most recent legislation for cap and trade, we know that the indigenous communities there were very active and engaged, and many of them started out as being project developers under California's program. So they got to carry that experience, and they were at the table and part of the conversation with legislative members on the design of that program. And so, yes, there's a bigger impact and a broader impact from the work that California does. And honestly, and this goes back to both of your points, you're traveling internationally. California is 1% of the world's greenhouse gases, less than 1%. Our largest impact is going to be how we actually help have a groundswelling of action. And what we're seeing is that with the money from the private sector and governments, if there's no government that is going to come into this space, the private sector has a huge role and potential role to play here. And there are lessons they should be taking from how some of this has been navigated in places like California as well. Okay, Javier, I am very cognizant that you have a flight at 1:30, and I want to make sure I don't keep you from your important meeting. Okay. Are there other questions in the room? There's one in the back.
So we're trying to do a better job of that. A lot of times, tribes that we've found or indigenous peoples don't necessarily quite share those success stories in a way that other industries or areas have. www.yuroktribe.org. We're also trying to get coders and programmers. So one of the things I share with my kids is rather than just being a purchaser of iPhones or Androids, we want to be the next generation innovators of those types of technologies. So you'll see on there, we're trying to work on our website. Again, Carr has my contact information as well. Feel free to reach out to me. I have created a briefing packet that I do share with legislatures, again, corporate partners, as well as other allies in the space. So feel free to reach out to me with an email, and I'll make sure and get that to you. But I'd also like to share with you, again, Rajinder and her team at the ARB. I believe they have a tribal section on their website. We were also working with the Shannon Dilly, the tribal liaison, and Shelby Livingston. But what we found is the exponential understanding, again, not only on the technical side from ARB, but on the policy and advocacy, but the educational sort of sense. Because a lot of times when you hear the state of California and the Yurok tribe are working cooperatively, and there's always other issues as well, that there's always challenges, but there's other states that don't have that type of working relationship. It's actually the opposite. And so we try to promote that. And again, I think it starts just with that fundamental understanding of having that information. So we appreciate now trying to share that story more. And feel free to reach out to us. And like I said, it's a team of one. But again, we have other partners. Cam Treadnext in the Sacramento area, again, helped us with not only aligning those purchases for the lands, but again, being in that conservation space where, we're reddening the green movement, right? A lot of times people want to save trees and save salmon and save seals and save things, but they exclude sort of that connection of the Yuroks. Our health and well-being are directly related to our forests and our rivers and our animals and our subsistence foods. So you can't disconnect the two. But thank you for the question, and I hope I answered that. But yeah, that's one of the areas. But reach out to me, and we'll make sure and get you that information.
So with the last few minutes, I'm going to offer you both an opportunity to say what you want to leave with the group in closing after the session, and maybe sitting here and reflecting on some of the things that you've been working on. What advice, what observations would you like to share?
Well, just
Thank you, Teresa. And again, I completely agree with everything Teresa shared as well. I guess there's always a parting words, but there's always when we see you again as well. So when you hear "ai kui," it's hello, but it's also it's not until I see you again. Respect, understanding, and action. In each of your spaces, you have the opportunity to recognize or learn more about Indigenous peoples, whether it's where you live or how you live or where you work. The ability to know that history, to reach out. It was encouraging to hear the consulate from Canada in Disneyland recognize the Gabrielino and Tongva people. We heard the president of the EDF also knowing those types of work. So we just encourage you to learn more about that history, how we cannot repeat some of those disenfranchising or types of areas that have not encouraged and empowered Indigenous peoples. We're coming to the table with solutions. We wanted to be decision makers, and there's a value added in working with us. And so even though we do support the market-based approaches, Indigenous peoples will be able to have those circular economies already traditionally in our communities. So we look forward to the opportunity to continue supporting the state of California as well as Mexico and any other allies or partners out there. So with love and respect, travel safely, and again, it's always a pleasure to be here at NACW.
Thank you so much, both of you, for the last hour. So please join me in a round of applause.